focused, where I want to teach you this thing because I think it's very important. I want to announce this thing because I'm so excited about it. Like, there's no worse opening line to an email than "we're happy to announce." Every time I read that, I'm like, fail. This email is a fail. Approaching communication with curiosity, compassion, and clarity, those three things, when you formulate comms, that alone helps you make more effective change communication.
Hey, you found Ways We Learn, an investigation of how learning happens across all ages and modalities. Let's go learn something. Hi, I'm Sean. Welcome back to Ways We Learn. Let's be honest with ourselves. Change sucks. I've been teaching and leading teachers for 20 years now, and that is the constant. Change sucks. It's really hard to learn because it's really hard to change. We love doing things the way we've always done them because it's much more comfortable and easier than doing new things differently. But if you've lived in this world for more than a few minutes, you know that change is a constant and we need to learn how to cope with it. And much of our experience in life is learning how to cope with change, and ideally, not just coping, but thriving in it. And luckily, there are people who can help us. My guest today, Caitlin Harper, is the founder of Commcoterie, an organizational change consultancy that helps leaders of small and mid-sized purpose-driven companies and nonprofits ideate, navigate, and communicate change. Prior to founding Commcoterie in 2020, she served organizations large and small as a change management, internal communication, and operations leader for more than a decade. And now she helps her clients uncover and untangle challenges, design strategies that catalyze change, and create compelling communication that engages stakeholders for change that sticks. And it's worth noting that Commcoterie is proud to be a woman-owned, queer-owned, and disability-owned business. So kudos for that. Today, Caitlin and I will be talking about the nature of change, why recognizing change as an integral part of learning helps us support it, and some strategies for creating learning experiences and presentations that create meaningful change. So Caitlin, thank you so much for joining Ways We Learn.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. No, great to have you on. Let's just start with your background. So tell me how you got to the field of organizational change.
It was an accident, kind of. So I studied English in school, in college, and I studied English in order to be like a writer, essentially. I had a concentration in fiction. So I was writing and reading and blah, 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 and they were like, you need to get some minors because you only need 10 courses to be an English major. And I was like, okay. So I did psychology, linguistics, and entrepreneurship. And like that combination just is basically my personality. Like that's what I love. That's the way that I move through the world, is like those things put together. So when I started working, I was always doing operations, problem solving for leaders as like what would be more of like a chief of staff kind of today. But at the time that wasn't a thing, I guess, so much in all industries, and communicating, because whoever I was working with, the founder was like, I can't write to save my life. Please come help me. You do this and also solve all of our problems. And finally, years and years and years later, I was working on a very, very big change project. And at the end of this 2-year project, this really fancy guy in a suit came up to me and was like, they pay people like a lot of money for what you just did. And I was like, oh, like my job? And they were like, he said, change management. And I said, yeah, absolutely. I know what that is, right? And I went home and Googled change management because I had never even heard the phrase before. And I was reading about change management for, long into the evening. And I was like, this describes exactly what I've been doing my whole career and also what I'm good at. And what I really, really enjoy about working with people is moving them through change, right? So then when I went out on my own, I was like, I'm gonna champion organizational change strategy for smaller organizations because everyone needs change strategy. It's not just, Fortune 500s. And the way I do change, organizational change, is very rooted in communication strategy. So that's what I do.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about, and this is, I mentioned a little bit about this in my intro, that change is really hard, but let's dig into that. So let's talk about the nature of change. Why is change so hard? Why is change so stressful? I've seen this in education for years, that it's very easy to do the things that you already know how to do, but when you start going into areas that are different, it becomes stressful. It invokes sort of a fight or flight response in some people. It can be really, really difficult. And let's dig into that. Why is that?
So change is, like, at its very, very core, basic, is the transition from a current state to a future state. And that's change of anything. People love the status quo. Even people who say, I'm a disruptor, I hate the status quo, or whatever, we're trying to change the status quo, they're leading the change of the status quo. And then the people impacted have an imbalance of power. So it is a lot about power, autonomy, who is leading the change, and whether or not people feel like they have a say in what's happening to them. So in any education setting, there is naturally a power imbalance, just like there is in the workplace. There's a boss or a teacher, and there are students, whatever, colleagues, employees. It's a natural power imbalance. There's no way to even the playing field without a strategy, because you cannot undo that power imbalance. Unless you're in like a Jedi situation and, the Padawan becomes the Jedi, and then everyone's on the even playing field. But there's still Obi-Wan Kenobi always there being
I love
the
that
best.
you've brought Star Wars into here. Thank you for doing that.
Well, I am an uber nerd, so that's why we're talking about that. There'll probably be a Harry Potter reference at some point as well.
Okay, bring it.
So, unless we consciously make an effort to bring people up and give them a sense of power and autonomy in what's happening to them, and make it feel like it's happening with them, people are always going to feel like they're being harmed, disrupted, harmed. There's some sort of stress or a burden of transition put on people who are going through any process from moving from the current state to the future state.
Yeah, and there's a thing that you'll often hear a teacher do, which is to say, hey, it's okay to make mistakes in here. Don't worry about being wrong. Everybody's here to learn, and all of that stuff. Why is that not sufficient?
Those are words, which I love, right? But if they're not reflected in act, we see the same thing in the workplace as well, right? We have psychological safety here. Right. And I'm like, no, you don't decide.
It's because I told you.
Right, I know. Yeah. It's like, it's okay to make mistakes, except when you make mistakes, you get a failing grade.
Right, or you get yelled at by the boss.
When is it okay? Yeah, when is it okay to make mistakes, and when is it not? If you don't see the actions of psychological safety reflected in the behavior of the person in power, you're never going to believe that. There will be no trust in that situation. So just saying hey, it's totally cool to mess up, unless that's just say what I say. I want to see what you do before I make any mistakes.
Yeah, and you actually had a really interesting statement when we talked initially, when we were talking about setting up the podcast recording. You said all change is harm, which is a really powerful statement. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I know. People are like, what? I'm not harming anyone. So say I come over to your house and I give you $1,000. I take it out of my pocket and I give it to you. Yeah, right. Yeah. It sounds amazing. And then you're like, wait a minute. This is $1,000 in cash. Okay. So now I was going to record a new podcast. Instead of doing that, I have to find a place to secure this cash, or I have to get in my car and I have to drive to the bank, or I have to, how am I going to use this cash, right? This is random cash. Now I have to talk to my partner about, are we going to invest it? Yeah. What are we going to do with this thing? So it's harm in that is a psychological burden that did not exist when I didn't come to your door and give you $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you're going to like get in a fight with your partner about that. I don't know if you're going to lose sleep tonight figuring out what you're going to do with this $1,000. Right? Like you could get a car crash on the way to the bank. Like anything could happen because of this butterfly effect of my change. So on the surface, and this is what happens, right? Teachers come into the classroom, you know, bosses come and say, hey, we're going to do this amazing thing. And I'm telling you that it's amazing. And instead of you feeling that this is amazing, you are feeling like there's another thing on my plate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the fight or flight comes in. It's just harm in that it's burdensome and disruptive.
One more thing to remember, one more thing to do.
One more thing to add to my list, my long list of things that I have to do.
Yeah.
And we see this a lot where there's like a campaign to convince everyone of how awesome something is and how much they should be excited about it.
Right.
And that's like poor change management communication as opposed to meeting people where they actually are and transitioning them through the change, which is what change management and change management communication is supposed to do.
So, and I think we're going to get into this. It's what you're saying is it's less about describing the future state. Hey, this is going to be so cool once you've learned this new technology. Don't worry about how hard it's going to be. And more about helping people cope with the change in the present.
Mm-hmm. So if they don't cope first, they're not going to move on to the future state.
Mm-hmm.
Actualization, right? Anyone who is bringing a change in, whether it's learning or any other change, they're already at the end of their change journey. So they've taken ownership over this thing. They're an expert. They're teaching it. They're a boss. They're the one who decided it. They're at the
Mm-hmm.
end. And now they're communicating this and they're telling these other people who have no idea what they're even going to say that they should be excited about something. So until you acknowledge this disruption, until you do definitely want to show people what the future state looks like for them, but you have to show them how to get there as well. So you can't
Mm-hmm.
say next year, you know, you're going to be able to use everything you learned when you graduate, or you're going to get a promotion, or blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, what happens like this week? Like,
There's
how
too
do I
much of a
apply
gap.
this now? Yeah. So
Yeah.
people, we don't want to be a future state like daydream. We want to give people like a very clear roadmap of behavior to move them through the transition process from this current state, right? We don't have a binary of current state, future state where you flip a switch. It is definitely a journey, even
Mm-hmm.
with the very smallest, seemingly insignificant changes.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about the sort of the application of this, which again is something that we'll get to, but thinking about it in the classroom versus in more of a business setting. The classroom, you've got more of a constant presence of the teacher, hopefully, right? They're there for class.
Right.
Whereas in a business, it's going to be more like the boss says, hey, we're doing this change, and then you have the person coming in who's doing the training or whatever, but there's this big gap between when you're supposed to have learned it and when you're actually sort of evaluated on the learning of it.
Right.
Whereas in a classroom, it's going to be more constant process. Does that make it easier in the classroom somehow to manage change, or where, like, how do those things relate?
So I will not say that teaching or learning is in any way easy. I will say that when you do traditional change management, that's why you have this concept of an executive sponsor. There needs to be a leadership presence throughout the change, endorsing it, sponsoring it, ensuring that it gets that power buy-in. Especially, even at big orgs, like you're asking an executive to like pay attention to like the nitty gritty of a change, or if a change is not, what we'll call business significant, right? If it's not a merger or acquisition, if it's not a round of layoffs, if it's not, some major expensive tech transformation, very rarely is there an executive sponsor. I don't even talk about executive sponsors when I'm doing change with my clients and stuff. Because they're like, we don't even have executives here. Like, what are you talking about? Right? We have partners, or we have a founder, or whatever, a small C-suite, and we don't like to call ourselves executives, So having that absence of, and this is another reason, like when I'm teaching, when I'm going in and doing a workshop series or a program or anything, I do not let the powers like exit the situation. They need to know what I'm teaching as well, because they're the ones that are going to be reinforcing it later on. And if we're using different language, if we're using, I don't know, different concepts, or, I tell them one thing and the executive's like, wait, I had no idea that's what, we didn't talk about that in the sales call, like what? They need to be a part of the change process, not only to endorse it in the moment so that participants can see that it's endorsed by the powers that be and there's psychological safety there, but they need to learn it in order to reinforce it as well.
But then it's not enough, you're saying, just to go, hey, okay, by the end of this, whatever, unit, week, whatever it is, you're going to be great at X. So just buckle down and get through it. That's definitely not the change management. That's just the change. So
Right.
what do you do then as the leader of that to help people move through that change process in a way that's going to support and work against that sort of fight or flight response?
Setting up some sort of, well, I don't want to call it a risk and reward system, right? Like, what are the stakes for not changing here? And I don't want it to be like everyone's getting fired or something, but like, what are the stakes here where, like, if we don't learn this new thing, we're not going to be able to use this new technology, which makes your life easier when you are servicing our clients, and, effective service of clients raises revenue, and then we get to hire more people for the team.
So
Like,
playing to the upside for the people learning
what
it.
is the upside? And also, what is the risk of not doing it, right? We don't only kind of want to be positive. We want to set the stakes, because if someone doesn't feel the risk of the status quo staying the same, there's very little incentive to change as well. Like, it needs to be a balance of risk and reward. So some traditional change managers, like, concepts or frameworks, I think take that a little bit too far, where they're like, they really lay out, like, if we don't do this thing, you will get fired, right? Or if we don't do this thing, everybody fails, or the business is going to shut down, or we're going to get beaten by our competitors. And I'm like, all right.
It's a lot of pressure.
Like, let's take it down a notch. Like, what's the reward then, right? And then they're like, money, power, right? Which is like, that's fine. But really, like, I mean, there are some studies where, right, there's a study, not study, but evidence out there right now that, like, people would take a pay cut for more flexibility, right? Like, I have, right? Like, I have my life set up in a certain way so that I have flexibility and I have time for self-care and everything. And that means that I'm, I reduce the amount of work that I do in order to do that. So what really matters to employees? Like, I have, a fellow consultant who is all about employee motivation. That's her whole thing. Like, what motivates people to perform? And it's the same tech. It's like, what motivates people to change? It's not fear and money. There are many other things on the spectrum of things that people are motivated by, and also things that people think are a risk to not change.
Yeah, and I'm starting to think about fear and money would be more, I assume, would be more of the business side, and then for the student side, like in a school, it wouldn't be money so much, but fear definitely, failing or not learning or whatever.
Well, it could be money, because it's like, if you don't do this, you're not going to get into a good college. You're not going to get a good job, right? And teachers say that. Teachers say, like, if you don't get a certain grade or whatever, you're not going to get into a good college.
How will you
succeed? Impact your whole life.
Yeah.
And when you're 14 years old, you're
It's
like,
pretty heavy.
okay, like
Yeah.
I hope I make it on time to soccer practice after school. Like, right. Like,
Right.
what is the point of learning all these things? Why would I want to do any of these things?
Yeah.
We see the same thing with like investing for retirement. You better invest in your 401k. Otherwise, when you're 67, you're not going to. I'm like, I'm
Got some
thinking about
time.
what I'm making my family for dinner, right? Like
Right.
if I'm going to choose between groceries and 401k, people choose groceries. But then meeting them where they are and figuring out what incremental behavioral changes would make sense for them, right? What's the barrier to changing? Take the 401k example. Opening an account. That's why workplaces should have automatic enrollment in 401k where you have to opt out, right?
Mhm.
That behavioral hurdle is gone then. And then what's the minimum amount I can invest right now? What's the maximum amount I can invest right now?
But it's hard to
So
connect to that when
it's
you're not
hard. You
feeling
can't
it.
connect it. You have to meet people where they are at the time and show them, well, communicate to them what behavior change now looks like, and then what the next steps in behavior change are in order to get to that future state that you want them to get to, and that you ideally want them to be inspired to also get to.
Okay, so then, yeah, let's get into that, the way that you communicate change. And you have a whole approach to this that you've developed. Can you talk about that? And also, as you're doing that, relate it to both, sort of any end of the spectrum from education through business? Like, how do you apply these things?
Mm-hmm. So I spoke a little bit before about this idea of like the change journey, right? From the first step is like awareness. And again, with this like first and last thing, we usually do awareness and then we want people to take ownership over a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we make an announcement or we tell people something one time and then we expect them to apply that straight away, learn it, or expect them to do something right away, right? Adopt new technology or do whatever we want them to do. And that's not the way it works, right? So there's many points on the journey in between. And when you're designing a communication strategy to get people along that journey, like I tell people to keep in mind, these are 3 communication pillars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times communication is speaker focused, where I want to teach you this thing because I think it's very important. I want to announce this thing because I'm so excited about it. Like there's no worse opening line to an email than "we're happy to announce." Every time I read that, I'm like, fail. This email is a fail. We are not happy to announce. Oh my gosh. Like we're happy to, there's nothing that takes the reader out of their feeling of importance than someone else being like, I'm happy to tell you this. And I'm like,
Be happy for me. We're announcing
yes,
this
I
thing.
really have no idea. Oh my gosh. That needs to be like eliminated from, the entire communication strategy of every organization.
They can just write it into Grammarly as
I
like,
seriously
cross it out.
delete
No.
it. Don't even let it be typed. Tell ChatGPT, tell them, call ChatGPT and tell them that
Mr.
they
GPT.
can't do it anymore. Excuse me, Sir GPT. So approaching communication with curiosity, compassion, and clarity, those 3 things, when you formulate comms, that alone helps you make more effective change communication. So if you're thinking about curiosity, if you approach something with curiosity, you will never type, "We're so happy to announce." Because if you're thinking about, and compassion and
Because that's
clarity,
me
right?
focused, not you
Because that's
focused.
me focused. So we want to be focused on the audience. Why is the audience interested in what I'm teaching, right?
Mhm.
Why are they going to pay attention in class rather than watching TikTok videos on their phone,
Mhm.
right? Why are they going to sit here through an all hands and take in what I say as opposed to, whispering to the person next to them or slacking someone else or not even coming to the meeting because they know last time they didn't get any valuable information for them, right?
And now in this example
yeah.
that you gave, right, you gave the example of the email starting with, "We're happy to announce." And yeah, I might not care what you're happy about. So then tweaking that so that you apply curiosity. It's an email. It's not a conversation. You can't, if I'm writing this to you, I can't say, "How do you feel about this thing?" So then what does curiosity mean in that exact application? Instead of saying we're happy to announce, how do I approach it with curiosity?
Before you even compose anything, what do you know about your audience? You have to channel curiosity into, that's where the difference between a strategy and a tactic. An email is a tactic.
Mm-hmm.
And a communication strategy is me taking a little bit of time before I communicate to an audience to figure out what matters to them. Right?
So it's not curiosity, it's not as in I'm asking you questions about how you feel. It's being curious about why
Being
would the audience
curious.
care about this. Got
So
it.
it's like,
Okay.
before you embark on communication, how am I being curious, compassionate, and clear in my strategy, design, my composition, my delivery, and my follow-up or my reinforcement, right? Those are the things, right? You're preparing
Why would this
someone,
matter to you? Yeah.
you're preparing yourself, right? Compassion is going back to this harm, reduction of harm, right? So compassion is consciousness of someone else's distress and a desire to reduce that distress. So sending out an important update at 4 p.m. on a Friday, distressing. My daycare for my daughter that just underwent a very poorly executed transition and is still doing it, and it's painful for me to watch. They bury information, very important information, in attached PDFs to emails.
Oh.
So now they're asking like busy parents to click into a PDF and then read the whole thing and then figure out what mattered. Like, and then we spend a lot of time in the parent WhatsApp trying to break it all down. People are right, like huge waste of time, waste of resources, waste of time, waste of energy. We're stressed out. Like, that is not compassionate communication, right?
Yeah.
And then it goes into clarity as well. It's audience focused communication, not we're happy to announce, not burying the important information somewhere else. You really want to be clear about what is important to that person, give them that information, give them clear next steps, show them, tell them what you expect from them, right? Here are the next steps that you need to take in order to enable yourself to move along this transition of change. And if any one of those pillars are out of balance, the reader or listener or recipient of communication can feel it. They know that. They know if you're not being compassionate and you're making things more stressful, and they don't care, right? Like, I feel like the daycare doesn't care. So all my interactions with them are as if they do not care about me, right? I get a lot of leaders who have no curiosity about what matters to people and why would they want to give their attention. They're like, of course they care about this. I'm like, no, you care about this now, right? That has nothing to do with the way your employees are feeling right now. And almost nothing I read is clear. So like, I've actually put clarity last when I mention it, because people are like, my communication is clear. I think we're all good here, Caitlin. And I'm like, we're going to talk about curiosity and compassion first.
We'll get there.
Right. I was like, clarity and what you think clarity is not what clarity is, right? We have to talk about the audience before you even consider what clarity looks like. Because you think clarity is saying the information that you think you need to tell them.
Yeah.
And you have not put yourself in their shoes, right?
It's really interesting because it feels like it boils down to know your audience or understand your audience. If you were going to sort of group all of this, what does your audience need to hear, as opposed to what do you think you want to tell them? Yeah. And it brings me back to some of the, I don't know, just some of the work that I was doing when I was building my own business and thinking about putting together a website. And I started off with, it was embarrassing now, but my first website was my logo at the top in what I later learned is called the hero section of the website, because that's the most important part of the page where somebody really learns why you're able to help them. my logo is not why I'm able to help them. And the feedback that I got on that was, okay, really nice logo. Not the right place to put it. Nobody wants to see your logo at the top of the website. And what they really want to see is how can you help them? And I went back and completely revised it to say, this is what I can do for you. And then realized that I had actually revised it for the wrong audience and re-revised it. And I'm still in a process of doing it. So it's that kind of thinking of what does the audience need to see, not
Right.
what do I think I want to tell them.
Yeah.
Not I'm happy about this, but why should you care about this? And then, like you said, making just making those communications, just sort of thinking about, if I were this person receiving this information, what would I need to see to feel not necessarily good about it, but at least understand what it is, why it matters to me, all of that stuff.
Right.
As opposed to, I'm just going to tell you this is awesome and believe that you're going to join in
Right.
because I pay you for it.
Yeah.
So,
And then
cool.
bombard you with more and more communication and reminders and updates trying to
Right.
convince you that this is awesome.
Right. Which is
And-
part of the compassion thing too. And
Right. I'm like, why are you
I
flooding me
can't
with this
handle all
stuff?
this. Yeah.
Like, what? And then people are like, no one reads my emails. And I'm like,
How many did you send?
I'm going to tell you a reason why. All right. I was like, I have a long list of reasons, but I can tell you the top 3 for sure. And we want to take it like even a step deeper than like, why should I care about this? Is like, so I've seen beautiful stakeholder matrices and communications plans and all this stuff about like, here's my key messages and da 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 da. And this concept of like, we need to communicate to them like, what's in it for me? And I actually don't even like the phrase "what's in it for me" because it makes the audience sound really grubby, greedy. Yeah, I'm like, what's in it for me? I'm like, oh, geez, like, is that the feeling that we're projecting onto our audience? And that's not what I want, right? I'm like, and I think the word "why" is a little bit charged as well. Like, oh, why do they care about this? And I'm like, okay. Right. But that's why it's what's in it for me. But I'm like, what would make them care about this? Right. Like, what is important to them? And it's not necessarily why they should care, because that's still why I think they should care about something. So these matrices, they'll say like, here are our employees, here are the managers, and here are the VP levels, and here are the, leaders of the ERGs and blah, blah, blah. And here's what's in it for me. And I'm like, where did you get that information? And they're like, well, it's what they think is in it for them. And I'm like, how do you know, like, where did you get that? And they're like, well, we know.
I made it up.
Right? We made it up based on what we think we know about them.
Yeah.
And this is like in marketing when you're talking about the voice of the customer or something like that. People are terrified to do voice of the customer interviews, myself included, because you actually don't want that feedback. There's a fear factor for me or you, whoever's doing that, whoever's doing the communication, whoever's leading the change. There's something deep down where they're hoping they can just announce, I'm making hand gestures on a podcast.
There is a video version, so people can see the hand gestures.
They hope that they can just splash it out, make an announcement, put something on LinkedIn, make a flyer, send out an email, and that the person will be so overwhelmed or compelled by their amazing story that they will change. I'm like, just talk to the person or talk to a representative audience, right? Talk to someone who knows them.
So is that what it comes down to then? Just not just
really
saying I understand, but like literally getting an understanding from talking to them.
Yeah. Or being with them.
Yeah.
As well. We talk about like culture champions at work a lot, change champions, of which I used to be one, which is why I kind of got to where I am, because leaders were like, what's going on the ground, Caitlin? What are people saying? I got asked, what are people saying every day? What is my team saying? And I'm like, do you want to ask them? So if you don't feel like you can tap into your audience in a comfortable way, you're lacking trust.
Hmm.
And you're lacking confidence in your ability to lead a change, basically. There's not trust there if you can't have an open and honest conversation with someone.
Yeah, and I imagine that is the feeling that a lot of sort of upper leadership would have, that, well, if I go and just ask someone how they feel about this change, they're going to tell me what I want to hear. They're going to tell me, or maybe they're going to tell me what I don't want to hear or something.
Right,
But
what I don't want to hear.
I'll just find out from Caitlin, how,
Who will tell me all
you're
the
friends
secrets.
with them,
Right,
so tell me,
yeah.
spill the beans. And what you're saying is that goes back to the curiosity, but it's more than just being curious. It's building the trust that allows for genuine conversation and understanding.
Yeah.
That if I don't understand what the people on the ground are actually thinking, and not just hearing it from others, but really getting it from those people, then I don't have a clear sense of how to communicate with them.
Right. Compassion. You need to have a sympathetic consciousness of someone else's distress. What would distress these people, right? And how can I relieve that?
Yeah, and it goes. I'm thinking back to the example I gave at the very beginning of this, where I said, a lot of teachers will just say, "Hey, this is a safe place. Don't worry about making mistakes," and that's something when I've trained teachers, I've been very conscious about saying to them, "Look, it's good to say that. They need to hear that it's okay to make a mistake, but it's not enough, because they are still afraid of making mistakes, no matter what you say. It's really helping people, like, understanding where they're coming from and why are they afraid of this, and then also helping, like you said, to model just, well, what does it look like to screw up, and that's another piece of advice I've given the teachers when I was in one of the boot camps. I remember training them on this, that I would say, look, tell them about screw ups that you've done in the field, like things that cost your company $1 million. Those are priceless stories to share in a classroom, because that's a real mess up and you survived it. So share that. Talk about that, and then maybe they'll be willing to talk about having messed up on their homework.
Yeah.
But so let's take this into the more, not that this isn't practical, but into the really practical. Say we're presenting on a change. I'm on a stage, in an email, in a setting where I need to present this thing. How do I do that? Like, let's get down to the nitty gritty of how we actually apply this stuff.
Strategy. Okay, cool.
Strategy.
So you're going in, you're going to do a presentation. We want everyone to, so first you ground yourself in the pillars, right? I'm going into this communication strategy with curiosity and compassion and clarity. Everything that comes out of my mouth, comes out of my fingers, whatever, needs to have those 3 pillars, be grounded in those pillars. So, then I like to look at it on like a timeline. So the presentation is here, right in the middle. All the communication that you do leading up to the presentation, some people are like, I put a calendar invite on someone's calendar. I'm like, okay, that might not be enough, but like sometimes that's all you get, right? So all the communication that's going to go out before the presentation, all the communication that's going to go out after the presentation. That's the timeline. We're not going to talk about like very extended reinforcement, but we'll talk about reinforcement post-presentation. And then how are you connecting with the audiences? Why, as in why they would want to change or do this new thing. So connecting to their status quo, their current state, and then showing them the future state behavior and what it looks like for them, right? The immediate application of how they can use this, and then connect it to why they should do that, right? So what is your presentation on?
I'll use an example right now that that I've been working on with an actual client. I do tech support on the side, and they're having me not convert. They don't have an accounting system for their home and business, and so I'm implementing QuickBooks for them.
Implementing QuickBooks. Okay, cool. Yeah. And you're going to teach them how to use QuickBooks then? Is that like the presentation?
Yeah, this is going to be going from not having a system of tracking your expenses to having a system in place that tracks everything, can report on your spending, links to your bank accounts, pulls in data, reconciles, like all of that stuff. Full accounting system from nothing.
All right. So you would want to understand, and again, to teachers and leaders, you're like, this is a clear and obvious benefit,
Absolutely.
right? A
Yeah.
clear and obvious benefit. Imagine that you do not feel that way, right?
Right.
Imagine that you hate technology, don't like to change, that you,
Yeah.
and I don't want to get super negative about it, but like you have a lot on your plate, right? Because a lot of leaders and change makers will say, who's going to resist this? How do we combat change resistance? And how do we,
How do we fight them?
right, fight this? And I'm like, whoa, just these people are busy people,
Yeah.
right? Whatever they're doing right now is not working the best that it could, but something is happening, right? Something is working. So we're going to tap into why they would want to change their behavior, why they would want to change. So as an instructor, you're going to want to talk to whoever's closest to those people or whoever you have access to and try to formulate the why for the people that you want to change, right? And then get whoever is in charge to articulate what the future state behavior looks like for them. And it can't be like total utilization of QuickBooks and no one ever makes a mistake, right? It needs to be like, listen, wow, when you learn this, you're going to be able to not do any overtime if you don't want to. When you get this, you're going to be able to eliminate this like horrible manual thing that you were doing or whatever. Like, what do they know people don't like about their day-to-day? And how is this QuickBooks, I know what QuickBooks is, I promise. How is QuickBooks?
This
I sound like I'm from the
thing.
past. I'm like, call ChatGPT. Get the QuickBooks up. So how is fully adopting and owning QuickBooks in their everyday lives going to make their everyday lives better, easier, faster, more enjoyable, better at work, right?
Yeah.
What are those two things? And then you want to see how you're going to embed those stories and embed the information, embed those messages in organic existing communication ahead of time. So I would want to hear the leader of that company in their next all hands be like, you know what? What's really hard for me is when we don't have QuickBooks, right? Like right now we're doing this and this is the impact, right? And like, man, you know what I'm going to do to help you? I'm bringing in an expert QuickBooks facilitator, right? And this isn't like a normal meeting way before you're going to do this thing. Normal meeting tied to finance or whatever they're talking about, where it makes total sense to bring it up. You know, you don't want to be like, Susan had her baby. Also, Sean's coming in to teach us about QuickBooks, right? So like, where does it make sense? And then repeat it so many times that the person communicating it feels weird about it. I'm like, you should feel like you said it too many times in organic, pre-existing messaging, not additional messaging. So where do people already hang out? What do they already say and do? They already use Slack? Put it in Slack. You have an employee newsletter? Add this in as a line item. Managers have meetings with their teams? Ask the managers to be like, hey, we already put time on your calendar for this training. I'm actually really excited about it, right? Give the managers some messaging to lay the groundwork for excitement about QuickBooks, right? And then you're going to do the exact same thing afterward.
So how does that relate? How does that relate
What?
back to those pillars then? So is that about the? Are you when you're thinking about them communicating the excitement about it? Is that about the curiosity?
It's
what
you're
do people
channeling
want to hear?
all of those things. So
It's all of them.
the embedding communication and storytelling and figuring out the why and blah, blah, those are tactics. And the curiosity, compassion, and clarity are applied onto the tactics.
Okay.
So if your tactic is send out 50 emails reminding people that this training is happening, that is not compassionate. It's not very clear because people are like, why am I doing this again? And you just saying, it's going to be so great when we do this. It's going to be so great when we do this. That's not clear for the people, right? And you're not getting curious about their why. If you ask their managers, if you give their managers messaging to use in their pre-existing meetings, that's taking someone who hopefully they have an existing relationship with, right? In a meeting they already have. So you're not adding any additional time. You're not adding a burden onto the managers because you're giving them very tailored messaging to use to pre-enforce this with their teams. It's clear because you're putting thought into what matters to them, and what communication channels and methods work best for them. And you're getting curious, right? Why are you interested in this? Why are you giving your attention to me rather than something else? Why are you going to show up? So how are we being curious, compassionate, and clear in the tactics that we're using? Because having a checklist of tactics that don't apply the pillars just reverts back to this, like, blast them, tell them, I'm so happy to announce. We're incredibly happy to announce that QuickBooks training is taking place on Thursday, July 7th, right? And people are like, there's nothing less interesting than that to me.
Yeah.
Why would I even show up, right? And prepare them, right? If this is a brand new thing they have to do from total scratch, maybe you have a quick Loom video you put in an email being like, just look at QuickBooks for 2 seconds, right? Here's a video from our instructor, Sean. He's here and he's just wants to say hi ahead of our meeting. I tell a lot of facilitators, consultants, people who are teaching to send a video ahead of time so people can see your face, right?
So that the first time they see you isn't the change. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, oh, I'm going to add your bio to the calendar invite. I'm like, that bio could say, click this link and win your private island or whatever. And no one's reading that bio. It doesn't matter what the bio says, right? No one's reading a bio in a calendar invite. It's not happening. So like, and that again, it's like their tactics, send a video, right? But those are, and you could send a super boring video and then that would not be clear, compassionate, and curious. So it's just like always like, how can I make this, if I have a tactic, how can I make it more clear? How can I be more compassionate? And what other questions do I have to ask? What other things do I have to consider to make sure that I am transitioning people from their current state to my ideal future state in the smoothest, least distressing way for them, the most helpful way for these people.
So you're seeing this as it's not the presentation where you deliver the information about the change. There's this huge ramp up to it and then a ramp away from it. I don't want to say ramp down, but after. And all of that is geared at supporting the actual change, the actual learning. So, all right. So you start by sort of preloading with empathy, right? Just sort of organically getting people to talk about this thing that's going to be implemented and why it's interesting and without it being sort of propaganda, join the cult kind of stuff. But so you're doing that as a lead in. And I can imagine people listening to this going, oh God, that's more work. But the point is
that I know. Once you do it, it's rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
And it's setting them up for success. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you don't do that and you just say July 7th, QuickBooks training, then people come into that going, oh God, why am I doing? And from the start, you're playing at a deficit.
Yep. And then you have to make that deficit up. Because then, and that's where you get failed change. Lack of adoption, lack of utilization, failed change. And that is like you do the resources, right? This is like a measure twice, cut once, penny wise, pound foolish situation, right?
Yeah.
You get your strategy down and the strategy is replicable. When you make the strategy for your organization or your business or your product or whatever it is, that is a rinse and repeat strategy that you can just tailor up and down depending on the org or the thing and make it longer or shorter, blah, blah, blah. But it's like a tried and true strategy that you can do. Because then, I mean, this is a change for you, right? Like, what's the risk of not doing the work first? The risk is that you teach them all how to use QuickBooks. None of them do it.
Right.
You never get invited back to that client, right?
Yeah.
Or your whole class fails their AP exam. Or whatever, right? Like the people that you're teaching to do something, the people that you're trying to change, don't do that thing. Then no one even logs into QuickBooks when they send it out. Then the IT team is like, or the HR team or whoever, it's like, now I got to send out 50 reminder emails to remind people to sign up for QuickBooks. Like, what? Then it's like, they don't use it. You've wasted all this money. You're paying per head for a subscription. Like, right now, thousands of dollars are going down the drain, all because you didn't do this, like this, you didn't set the stage for change and take people through the change process.
Set it up for success. Yeah.
And that is what I try to tell everybody. This is like the thesis of my life. I want it to go on like my gravestone. Like, communicate early and often with curiosity, compassion, and clarity. Like, that is what I want. And when you do it, you'll see the clear ROI. You'll see them quickly adopt and utilize the thing, and then you'll get your ROI, whatever investment you made in whatever it is that you're trying to do. You'll see the ROI of that immediately, and so will they. So it's like a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and I'm as we're talking about this, I'm connecting this to classroom experience and thinking about just some of the training that I've given, which is some of the worst teaching that you can do is when you say, okay, everybody turn the page, we're in the next chapter, now let's learn the next thing. Yeah. Because there's no connection, there's no preparation, there's no meaning behind it. It's just, now we're in chapter 3. Why are we in chapter 3? Well, we were in chapter 2 yesterday and we finished it. Yeah. And it's a much more conscious process as a teacher to be thinking ahead like that and thinking backwards, but to make it a more holistic view of, well, what is it about chapter 3 that relates to whatever, the unit, the class, and starting to talk about when you introduce a new concept, it's not just let's learn the concept and the mechanics and the process of learning the concept. It's, well, we're going to learn this thing because this is essential as you get down the road into this next thing that we're going to go into, whatever physics, concept or whatever the thing is. This is going to be an essential part of it. Why is it an essential part? Well, let's talk about the field of physics and why this is necessary. And then as you're moving forward and you get it past the thing, you go, all right, well, so remember that stuff that we talked about, a month ago in chapter 2. Well, this is where that becomes really important. And it's that relation to, again, the why, the meaning, the relevance of it. And one of the things that we know about learning, and this comes out of adult learning theory, but it's really true for everybody, is that people learn best when things are relevant. And so I see so much connection between that and what you're talking about, that relevance and meaning in change is the same as relevance and meaning in any learning scenario, which is change, as we've now established. Right. That if it's not meaningful to me, if it's not relevant to me, you're going to be fighting me the whole way through, because my brain is going to go, I don't need this. Right. I'm thinking about whatever I'm getting for lunch.
What I'm going to have for lunch, which is what I'm thinking about right now. No, I'm kidding. I'm definitely listening to everything you're saying.
Yeah. I'm sure you are. Okay, so we've got the lead in, right? Connecting with the why, embedding those stories, the storytelling thing, showing the future state behavior. Then you're in the room, you're actually doing the presentation. What are some of the things that you as an organizational change consultant try to do during the experience that would help someone to navigate that change?
I love to hear from people, and I do this when I teach workshops too. It's like, bring messaging that you are planning on sending out to the class, and we're going to talk about how to make this more impactful change communication now. And then when you leave, you're going to have it, and then you're going to use it. Mm-hmm. So if I'm not teaching change communication, or I'm in school or something, I'm like, what are you doing? What's your plan of action and behavior change? How are you planning on changing this behavior? How are you applying this? If you are telling someone to do something, to learn something, to do whatever, and you have not made them understand how it's relevant and meaningful to them to do something differently, they're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's an example I use a lot, which is like, recycling is a terrible sham in most places, and is so sad and makes me really depressed. But like, say a mom who has 3 kids and lives with her mom, the grandma, all live in the same house, and the city is like, you all need to start recycling, otherwise we're going to fine you $50. Mm-hmm. That matters to the mom. She's like, this house is recycling, right? Because I don't want to get fined $50. The city knows what matters to mom.
Mm-hmm.
She has to go and tell her 3 kids and her aging mother to now recycle. Otherwise, she's going to have to go through and sort through the recycling. And she's like, I'm not doing that, right? So she needs to connect to her mother, who is like, what are you talking about even? Right? So she might tell her grandmother, you care about your grandkids. Recycling makes a better world for your grandkids. Please put this bottle in this bucket forever, right? She needs to connect to her apathetic teenager. She needs to connect to her hyperactive 7-year-old, right? So she uses the 12-year-old who loves sea turtles, that passion, to talk to the other kids about how, like, I care about sea turtles and you love me. So put this bottle in this bucket forever, please, right? The little kid wants to be like the big kid. So watch him do it. You can help him, right? The older sister is like, okay, if you really care about this world and you don't want to be apathetic and you're always complaining about, you know, whatever, Mrs. Greenpeace, this is part of that, right? So like tapping
But it's not
into
about the $50 that the mom
it's
cares
not about the
It's helping
$50. If the mom comes in and says, I'm going to get charged $50 at the end of the month, right? The little kid's like, I don't know what a month is.
It's like,
right?
all right.
Yeah. The teenager's like, I have my own job. So why do I mean, that sounds rude, but it's like, right? The teenager's like, I don't have time for this. No, it's like what matters. And it is more work up front to do these things. But consistently coming in and complaining and getting in a fight with your family about the $50 every single month and then trying to punish them, saying now we can't, you know, get Friday night pizza because I had to pay $50, da da da. And that's what we do in the workplace and in school, right? In any learning setting.
Yeah. So then when you're not dealing with plastic bottles and sea turtles, but you're dealing with QuickBooks in that that change environment, that training scenario, you're thinking about how does this specific thing that we're training you on, not just what are the mechanics of what you need to do, but why does it matter to you? So it's still channeling the why.
It's channeling the why, right?
But
What matters?
Yeah, and it's how do I get in the head of the person who's watching this training and say, well, what is it about this software, this new process? What is it about it that's going to make their life better, right? Being able to run reports now means that you're not doing back of the napkin math on the CEO's expenses and trying to match that up to what came back from the credit card. You actually know what's going to come back from the credit card because you have a report already. That kind of stuff where you're...
And how does that show up? You've had to work through lunch every Friday for the whole month to do this back of the napkin stuff.
What's the pain point that this is fixing for you?
Now with QuickBooks, you don't have to work through lunch anymore. Ever
so
again.
It's sort of a balance now. You're creating a balance now between the pain of learning something new, right? The harm of learning something new,
right?
And the harm of not, right?
Right.
So if you stay the way it is, you're still going to be working through lunch every time the boss comes and throws all these receipts on the table.
Right.
That's going to never go away. But if you put in the time now and the energy now, you wouldn't say it this way, but that's the effect it has, right? You learn this stuff. Now you're going to have these reports auto-generated. They're going to be easier to read. You might not even need to read them because now they can just go straight to finance, right? That it's taking all of that pain off of you in exchange for a little bit of pain right now.
Right.
And so it sort of shifts away.
And validating that pain in the moment.
Yeah.
Like the first best thing someone can do is come in and this is curiosity, compassion, and clarity, right? Like walking in and being like, I know you all have to sit with me an hour a week for the next 6 weeks and learn this. I know it's taking you away from your job and blah, blah, blah. And here's why we're doing this, because you'll never have to work through lunch again, right? Yeah. And you're not going to say maybe this is a situation either, but like people will stick with the devil they know rather than, and that's the harm, pain, balance, blah, blah, blah. Acknowledging that there is a devil that they know and you know what it is. And then acknowledging the fact that moving to something new, you don't want to say, all of you adults are scared of using QuickBooks, right? Like, right? People are like, no, God, you don't understand me at all, right? We're like, it's kind of a pain to sit here and do this, right? And, no one wants to like, slog their way through new technology. Here's how we're going to make it engaging. And then people like you, brilliant facilitators, teachers, instructional designers, you make the event, the change event where they're learning the thing or doing the thing or whatever the thing is happening to them. You make that engaging.
Yeah.
Right. And people put so much effort and energy into their instructional design of the event. And then they get so upset when the people don't adopt the change. And that's one of the things I hear from other consultants and teachers the most is like, I can't believe with my beautiful workshop that I made, that I care about so much, that's so important, no one did the thing.
Yeah.
Why not? And I get asked that from other consultants all the time. They're like, I'm amazing at this, right? And I'm like, I'm sure you are amazing at this. What you're not amazing at is all the before and after work.
Yeah. So let's get to that after work then. What is the just one example of something that you would do to make sure that this sticks? Because I can go in, I can lead this brilliant presentation, walk away to thunderous applause. Everyone loved how much I told them they're going to love QuickBooks. And then they go, okay, cool, that was it. Let's go back to back of the napkin. So what do we do to reinforce this stuff when we're not in the room?
Think about all the barriers to adoption and ownership. Because adoption and ownership are the last two things. So you're not there in the room for the adoption and ownership portion. Right. You're there for the awareness, which is the first step. Awareness, understanding, though that's the beginning. Awareness, understanding, and then people put a lot of different things in there. I just talk about awareness, understanding, adoption, and ownership, right? You learn about the thing, you understand the thing, you start to use the thing, you love the thing, and you tell everyone about how cool it is.
Right.
right. New employees start, and you're like, I can't wait for you to learn about QuickBooks, right? Like that sort of thing. So the teacher is usually only there for the awareness and maybe the understanding.
Right.
And then they're like, nailed it. Right?
I'm out.
So adoption and ownership is like, okay, leader, whoever brought me in, whoever's like instituting this change, the executive sponsor or whatever, your client, basically whoever's paying for you to be there. What's your plan? What's your plan for this? And they're like, you taught them how to do it. And
I hired
like,
you.
Okay, I know. And that's why I tell people, I'm like, bring your strategy. That's a differentiator, right? If you go there and you're like, not only do I have a strategy for awareness and understanding, but here's my takeaway strategy for you as a leader for adoption and ownership so you can reinforce this long term and you get your ROI. They're like, I've never heard any of these words before. I need to change now, right? Like I teach my clients to do these things because they don't do them either as leaders. So sending out extra demo videos, having the managers, again, reinforce it during a training, success stories. So the CEO or whoever people think is very important or influential. And again, it sounds cheesy propaganda, but like you're at work. Everything's a little bit cheesy, right? And be like, hey, Sarah, like you went to the QuickBooks training, right? Can you just like tell everyone like how awesome it is that you don't work through lunch anymore? And Sarah's like, absolutely. I will brag about how I don't do that, right? Like I'm a genius. I'm an early adopter. So identify the early adopters, use them as change champions, give them messaging, help them sway their audiences, right? And you can tap into those people however you would tap into a social media influencer, right? What matters to them? Looking cool and smart in front of their peers. Be like, hey, I noticed that I can see in the report that you are the one who's entering all of your reports and no one else is yet, right? Can you just stand up and tell everyone how easy and amazing this is?
Why has this made a difference for you?
Yeah, be an employee advocate and show them what successful behavior, future state behavior looks like. And they identify with you.
Yeah, so it's sort of, you start at the front end of this, you're starting with the why. Why is this going to be helpful to you? You get into the presentation, the actual training, you're focusing on that. This is what the change is going to look like. This is how you do it. This is why it's going to help you. And then the tail end of it is still coming back to that why. This is why it worked.
Same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing. But like at that point, you have evidence you can use, real evidence, right? Not like I messed up one time a million years ago. It's like, hey, so-and-so was struggling with this and this is how they overcame it. You can too. Show them like any sort of data storytelling you can do. Like, hey, we've saved $6,000 by using this software because of the hours that we're saving. And we're going to reinvest that into the company in this way. You are
Pizza
literally
days.
impacting this. Yeah, right? Like we're going to Disney World. Like, right? Like whatever. We're going to do whatever we're going to do. Figure out something that matters to the audience.
Yeah.
So like the CFO will go up there and be like, we saved 4% year over year. I'm like,
right, talking about EBITDA or whatever.
What are you even saying to me right now? Like, this is nothing, right? I want to know like when my 401k match is increasing. Like, thank you, right?
Right. When are the raises coming?
And again, that's like money, but like there are non-monetary benefits that people appreciate even more. And then just like, we don't want to do like weird email blast success story campaigns. It's just like, what is normal communication here? And how are we harnessing that for my story as well to reinforce this thing? Not
very
50
consciously
reminders. Yeah, not 100 reminders. Make sure you use QuickBooks. Everyone make sure that you do blah, blah, blah. We're not hitting our targets. I'm like, ugh, gross. Delete. Spam folder. Like, no.
Yeah.
So that engaging post communication. And then you're setting up that entire structure of change increases the change capabilities at your organization. So,
and like you said, it becomes more of a rinse and repeat next time.
Next time you need them to learn something, they know that they trust that you are going to tell them the benefit to them first. You're going to show them exactly what behaviors need to be done. And then you're going to show them what this future state looks like and why it's good for them. Right?
Nice. Well, I wish we had had this conversation before I got started with my QuickBooks project, but I'm happy to say I've done some of this. I'm happy to say I've done some of this stuff, but I'm definitely going to incorporate this. But obviously, you're seriously expert at this stuff. If people want to learn more about what you do, what else would you like them to know as we close?
I work with small purpose-driven orgs, so if your org is trying to make the world a better place and you want to change more efficiently and effectively and engagingly, that's what I do. And my website's commcoterie.com, and I host a free monthly organizational change office hours. So any leader, change maker, people leader, consultant, whoever's doing change or asking people to learn or change, they can stop by office hours, ask me any questions. We go through different topics every month, and then we do a big Q&A. It's really fun.
Sounds awesome. And I'll put those links in the episode notes so people can check it out. Caitlin, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for joining Ways We Learn. I really appreciate you taking the time for this.
Yeah, I mean, I told you before, this is my favorite topic probably ever, aside from Quidditch. There's the Harry Potter.
There's the Harry Potter. We did it.
And yeah, I always love talking to you. So awesome. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, no, thank you. And folks, thank you for listening, and always keep learning. Did you learn something just now? Get the full episode of Ways We Learn wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, we'd love to get your rating or review.